In this nugget, you and I will analyze Control Panel. Only not this Control Panel, this Categorize Control Panel, which was supposed to make it easier for us to adjust our computer's settings. No, we're going to drop that view by, and we're going to say we want nice large icons, and we want this view. This is so much easier for me to find particular features that we are going to manipulate. Now, the first on our list to study is the Internet options. Notice, Internet options. Aha! We would have struggled to find that probably in the previous view. But anyways, we go into Internet options, and we want to be familiar with what we can control in here in Control Panel and where it is located on these tabs. Yes, I know this is kind of silly to ask us to memorize where stuff is in Windows Control Panel, but that's what we're going to need to do from a certification perspective. Now, speaking of Internet options, that might look a little familiar to you. Yep, it sure should, because if you go in Internet Explorer and you go to the tools of Internet Explorer and you choose none other than Internet options, you're going to get that same set of options we access in Control Panel. Now, you can always count on me to be very upfront and frank with you. One of the things that annoys me a little bit about these types of questions in the exam where would you find some feature is that this is dependent on the version of Internet Explorer that you're working with. So later versions of Internet Explorer might not look like this at all. But anyways, on the General tab, we would set the home page for our browser. We would say what happens when we start the browser. We would manipulate tabs settings. The browser history setting is here, enabling us, by the way, to delete temporary files in the history and all that stuff, and the overall appearance of the browser. The security tab is hugely important, and you notice that things are manipulated in zones. So if we access some web page from our local intranet, not going out to the internet, it's going to have potentially different settings than if we go out to the internet. We can put stuff in trusted sites. We can go to restricted sites and add sites to this area or let them default to that area. And notice there'll be different security settings. There's a privacy tab that we can use to do things like the manipulation of cookies. This is where we have a pop-up blocker, whether or not we're going to share our location, whether we want in private browsing and how that would work, specifically whether or not we'd do toolbars or extensions when we're doing the in private browsing. Realize that in most browsers today, you can literally say, look, I don't want to be tracked as far as history or cookies or anything while I'm browsing. Keep in mind your organization can still track where you go as well as your service provider. The Content tab is important because in some versions of Internet Explorer, this is where we get family safety. In all other versions, we'll get stuff like certificates and autocomplete, and if we want to have particular RSS feeds feeding into our browser for like news updates and things like that. It's the family safety here on the Content tab, though, that I really wanted to point out. Then we have the Connections tab. This is where we would add a VPN connection, for instance, if we needed to connect to our workplace headquarters, for instance, securely over the internet. Programs will allow us how to deal with things like PDF files that we might visit as we peruse the internet. Are they going to open right in Internet Explorer? Are they going to open with another program, etc.? And then finally, the Advanced tab is for just that. Super advanced settings you might make when you are browsing, when you want certain accessibility features, etc. We typically never go in here, although there is something super powerful in here, and that is to reset everything to defaults. So if we've gone in and make settings that are messing up our browsing experience, we could always get IE back to its defaults by utilizing the reset feature. The next option that we want to look at in Control Panel is Display. And what's funny is in a Windows 8 world, it brings you to changing the size of items on the desktop and change only the text size and all this kind of weird stuff. As an admin or an expert user, what you would really want to be brought to is adjust the resolution. This is what we are after most of the time, isn't it? We want to adjust the visible resolution, maybe even the orientation. We want to add additional monitors, and we want to plan how those are going to be laid out. So this is the important area of control panel for us, and this is what would be mentioned for display in your exam. Notice there's the advanced settings, and this is where you would find something like refresh rate to manipulate, and it's so rare that we would want to manipulate refresh rate. Now, a couple of these control panel areas we will skip even though they're listed here because we've already covered them in detail other places, or we will, like user accounts and folder options, like viewing hidden files and hiding extensions. We've already covered that extensively. Windows Firewall we've talked about, and we'll cover that more in security. Device Manager. Let's hit one that we haven't really covered though, and that's System. I think this might have come up a little bit in some way when we were talking about, for instance, joining a domain. Notice I could go to Advanced System Settings. This will bring up this System Properties dialog box, and I could go over and I could change our domain or workgroup membership from here. By the way, we also talked about the System Protection tab where we can do cool stuff like System Restore. But there's something that we haven't discussed yet, and that's the Advanced tab, specifically the Performance area under Advanced. If we come in here, it will allow us to control either whether Windows decides how much performance we can handle as far as visual effects, or we go in and say, you know what? We don't want all the fancy effects. We just want best performance. And now we answer the question that many of your users are going to ask you about: why does their system shut off? Just spontaneously, the screen will go dark, or the system itself will appear to shut off. Or what happens if they're running Windows and they close the lid of their laptop? All of this is available for us under Power Options. Notice, by default, we're balanced, recommended, thank you very much. If you go into Change Plan Settings, you'll see that the display will turn off on this system after 10 minutes. There would be other options in here, by the way, for a different type of installation. Like a laptop installation is going to have a lot more settings, and you'll literally be able to choose what happens when the power button's pressed, what happens when the lid on the laptop is closed. So all this type of behavior is controlled through Power Options. What about when your users install stuff that they no longer want? In fact, they installed stuff that is impeding the performance of their system. It's programs and features. And as its name implies, it's not just about programs that could be uninstalled, and this is hysterical. In this fresh install, we have literally nothing that's been installed, so there's nothing to uninstall. Oh, what a glorious thing. Notice normally we're going to be able to uninstall, change, or repair an application that's been installed here. But something else that's powerful about this in Control Panel is we can see what updates have been applied, and we can turn Windows features on and off. You and I looked at this before when we talked about running Hyper-V as a way to virtualize other operating systems on this device. Notice this is not a default installation component. It's a feature we can turn on or off from this area of Control Panel. Microsoft did another enhancement to versions of Windows, and that was to create this feature called a home group. You see, what they had done was they had done a work group for business environments that were small businesses. They had done a domain for enterprises, big businesses, but they really didn't have any home functionality, which was silly since most home edition purchasers of Windows, or even Windows 10 non-Pro edition, were really interested in sharing stuff in the home. So that's what a home group is all about. you can see I've joined my computer to a home group in here, and now I decide what it is I will share with other home group members. So of all the areas that CompTIA suggests I cover with you of control panel here in this section of our course, there's only really one that we're not going to cover explicitly in other places left, and that is troubleshooting. And this is one of the funniest ones for me because it's never, ever, ever worked for me. So I've just stopped trying it. But the idea here is you would come in and like, oh, I can't connect to the internet. So you would come into the troubleshooting thing and you would say, okay, help me figure out why I can't connect to the internet. And you will be guided through a wizard that will work through this. Look, maybe this works in circumstances for home users. I don't know. It's just that I would always more advanced troubleshoot using, ironically enough, other aspects of control panel, and I'm sure that's what you will be doing as well. So this is really geared for the end user. You and I aren't end users, and that's maybe why there's the disconnect. Well, we've got time here at the end of this nugget for a pop quiz, and here we go. Where would you go in control panel to control what happens when your user closes their laptop lid? Options: display, programs and features, power options, or troubleshooting. So I'm in the exam and I say, well, I've never gone there for anything in my entire life. I'll knock that off. Programs and features, I know that's where I would go to uninstall or repair a program that I've installed already or add features to Windows. So nope, I've thought about in my mind what's there and that doesn't sound good. Display and power options could both be possibilities. Let's see, display, we go in there for resolution, refresh settings. Yep, gotta be power options. Do we want the machine to shut off? Do we want it to hibernate? Do we want it to sleep? Do we want it to whatever? It is through the power options that we dictate what happens when things like the lid is closed or the power button is pressed on the system. So, as you and I know, this nugget was all about control panel, specifically those areas of control panel that we have not explicitly covered in other areas of this course or will cover in this course. I sure hope this nugget was informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.